From Chicago's CAN TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
And hello again. Welcome to another edition of Chicago Newsroom right here on CAN TV. I'm Ken Davis. So glad to have you with us on our summer series right here on CAN TV. In keeping with the tradition of summer, we might actually have this week the first week that has contained some slow news days. A lot of the stories are kind of continuing on, but in a rather lugubrious way, I think we would say. Sarah Karp joining us today from Catalyst Chicago. Glad to have you back, Sarah. Thank you for doing it. And also Charlie Meyerson, back on the show again. Charlie is an independent journalist and blogger.
I come to you every time I have free time on my schedule. I'm happy to be here.
Charlie, it's worth mentioning, was the bureau chief for FM News 101 during its brief but glorious time with us.
It was a thrill-packed year.
Yes,
it really was,
yeah.
and it was great fun covering.
It was about
City
a
Hall
year,
for that
right?
time.
Just exactly.
Just
a year.
almost exactly a year. A little more than a year for me.
And it was really fun having you on the show during that time, and whatever else happens from here on out.
I'm just as fun now as I was then.
I am absolutely certain that you are. And by the way, it's worth mentioning that you're doing this daily blog of. You're trying desperately to keep it to 3 things today, but it always
squeeze in more,
it gets to 5 and 6.
3 things at least.
Right.
And maybe some.
And that's at Charlie Meyerson.
Meyerson.blogspot.com.
There you go. We'll have a link to it on ChicagoNewsroom.com too, so you'll be able to see it from there. So anyway, guys, thanks so much for being here with us today. You know what? This is just completely off the wall, but something that actually you pointed to the other day in your Charlie Meyerson's 3 things. That I thought was really interesting, in that the New York Times, and we're starting far afield here, but the New York Times is now a reader-supported organization like public radio or television or something.
They've crossed that threshold at the point where subscriber revenue from the print edition and the various online packages that they offer now exceeds the amount of revenue they're getting from advertising.
That's really, I mean, if you really stop and think about it, that's pretty amazing. And it really is like a point in time that will be referred back to in 20 years.
If the trend continues. It's something a lot of organizations, particularly as the advertising market has dwindled, would like to be able to do. It's something few organizations have been able to do. The New York Times has a reputation for unique, original content that you can't get anywhere else. They've been successful in kind of walling it off and saying, if you want it, you're going to have to pay for it to some extent in some channels. And it insulates the New York Times to some extent. I mean, they're still almost 50% dependent on ad revenue, so there's plenty of ways to fall there. But it insulates them from the the vagaries of the ad market.
It does, and the numbers are staggering. I mean, advertising in the second quarter was down 6.6%. That's bad news, down to 220 million. But subscriptions are going up and up and up. They were up 8.3 in just one quarter to 223 million or 233 million. So $10 million a quarter more from advertising.
But the pitfall that they face is as any media organization walls off more and more content, circulation tends to stabilize. And advertisers, always looking for bigger and bigger audiences, may find more and more reason to pull out. Again, roughly half their revenue at this point is in danger if they can't continue to grow. Their
But I mean,
audience.
this is something that on a slightly smaller scale you guys face every day at Catalyst, and 100 other smaller organizations that are trying to do real and original and worthwhile journalism, and you have to figure out some way to pay the bills. And it's just really, I gotta say, it's just really encouraging to me to see that at least some portion of the public is willing to pay for quality work when they see it. I don't know.
And hopefully that will make other organizations invest in quality work, like the Tribune, as they're starting to wall off some material. And you notice that there are some stories there that you would actually, for me, I would read otherwise, but I don't want to pay at the moment, only because I get the Trib at work if I really want to see it. But I'm hopeful that will make people invest, these organizations invest in, because we've had a real dwindling of good content from a lot of the major news organizations.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to me as somebody who had much of his career in public radio, which, from the very beginning had that model, and nobody really originally thought that it could work, and it's just become incredibly successful over the years because people are willing to say, this is unique, it serves some of my needs, and I'll pay you a buck a day or whatever it is, or half a buck a day, I'll give it to you. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. We're here to
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. We're here to discuss Chicago news and what it means and put it into some perspective for this past week. So Sarah, what do you think? What's at the top of your list?
This past week has been a really slow week. I mean, the Chicago Public Schools, which is what we mainly cover, has really been, slow. And after weeks of just, different news stories every day with the budget and with the teachers union stuff. So we're taking a little break. I mean, right now, I mean, we're looking at the pension stuff is a big deal. Governor Quinn calling the legislature back into session for the pension, and I think that actually for a lot of the local institutions, I mean, like the schools, it's going to mean a lot to see what kind of pension reform comes along. So that's going to be something to watch.
Well, I mean, we're talking about a whole mishmash of things here, but the governor has asked for a special session. Whether he's going to get it or not is another question, I guess. But there are, 5 pension systems in Illinois that run through the state legislature, and combined they're at least $83 billion upside down, maybe more, maybe 10 billion more, nobody really knows. But the real question is, where is there any incentive for legislators who are currently, it's sort of like a game of musical chairs. These are the people who happen to be sitting in the chair when the music stopped or something. I mean, their predecessors are the ones who did this. They said, oh yeah, we'll give you all the pension you want. We just won't put any money in it, and then somebody somewhere down the line is going to have to deal with this, and it's these folks. So why are they going to do anything? Why, if you were a state legislator, would you go down there and vote to make massive cuts or massive tax increases, or would you just kick it again down the road?
Or change some of the logistics of how you get your pension, which is probably one of the things that they're going to look at. Do you have to be old or things like that? And then also whether the school districts have to pay in, because right now the local school districts outside of Chicago, CPS supports its own pension, has to pay in. I mean, I don't know, there's also the idea that if we don't do something to change the pension system, eventually it's going to really, bankrupt the whole state. Yeah. So that might be an incentive. I don't know. But
we have this conversation automatically becomes very complicated because there are so many different pieces in motion. But one of the conversations, as you mentioned, Sarah, is the issue of whether or not the state should be paying pensions for smaller school districts and so forth, and they don't do that in Chicago. Now, some people in Chicago have made the argument that I'm paying twice. I'm paying for the CPS teachers' pensions, or employees' pensions, and then I also get dinged out of my state taxes because some of that money goes to pay for, shall we say, Oak Park's teachers, just to pick on a suburb. Okay. Yeah. I mean, but is that actually true, or is it more complicated than even that?
Oh, it's always more complicated than even that. And I'm not the person to explain all the complications. But I think Mayor Emanuel and others have made a pretty good case for the fact that because salaries and related benefits are set at the local level, that you're going to get more responsible budgetary decision making. At the local level, if local taxpayers are responsible for their own costs. That salaries will be set more reasonably, and pension benefits will be set more reasonably.
I'm not sure that too many of us even realized that this was the case until the last 6 months or so. I mean, I have to say that the first time I read it somewhere, I thought, what? How did this happen? I mean, so you are the school board, the elected school board in a small town somewhere in the cornfield, and you can say, oh yeah, we'll give our teachers really nice pensions, which of course you might need to do because you have to attract teachers to come. So I can see the reason for doing that. And if in addition to it you also don't have to pay for it, the taxpayers of Illinois will pay for it, well, now there's a sweet deal.
It is, but
Right.
you know, I think a lot of the key stakeholders in this have been talking about a relatively long phase-in period for some of the changes.
Right.
So I think that makes it easier for existing office holders to say, we're starting the clock now. Everyone plan on changes that will take fully effect in 10 years.
Yeah.
See you later. See you
And
later.
it also creates this really juicily interesting paradox where it's the Republicans who are saying, "Oh no, we got to keep this going because those are my constituents in downstate Illinois." So in Illinois, the Republicans are in favor of keeping the pensions where they are, and not anyway.
Mark Brown had a good column earlier this week, basically saying, "Don't let one party blame it on the other.
Right.
Apply pressure to everyone.
Every single one of them.
You are responsible if something doesn't
Yeah,
happen.
right,
You are responsible if compromise doesn't emerge." I think
And
he's right.
even more than that, blame their predecessors who have left the state employment and are off enjoying their pensions in
Right.
Florida somewhere.
Wouldn't that be nice if we could have a tribunal for some of those people?
Right.
Bring them back. All right, Sarah, when we first asked you to come on the show a while ago, we did so because I wanted to have you were my first pick of someone to come here and sit in front of these cameras and explain what the heck this CTU CPS agreement that everybody is so excited about really does and how it works. Because I got to tell you, the more I've talked to people and the more I've read about it and the more I've heard about it, the more confused I get. Here's what I understand, okay? CPS agreed that they would hire about, in rough numbers, 500 teachers, and parenthetically teachers that had been laid off before. That translates into approximately 1 per elementary school, roughly, right? Somewhere in that neighborhood. So by hiring these teachers, it's now possible that the kids get a half an hour a day more. Every kid gets a half an hour a day more, but none of the other teachers have to work a minute longer in the elementary school side of things. How does that work unless this teacher you've hired is the gym teacher and they take everybody in the school and throw them in the gym for half an hour at the end of the day?
Right.
I mean, how does it work?
It doesn't work. It was sort of.
Oh, thank you. Oh, okay. You see, I knew you would.
Thanks for joining us on Chicago Newsroom.
We'll
See
see
you
you
later.
next week. Yeah.
Well, because the side note that nobody really talked about is that the real reason why the compromise allows for the longer day is because originally when they talked about the longer day, they wanted teachers to come in early for planning. They wanted teachers to work their lunch, so have their lunch with the kids and be with the kids. And they wanted to build in a planning time. Well, now what they're doing is they're not having any of that, because one of the things that CPS was trying to, that Chicago Public Schools was trying to do, is to say, we're going to add not only more time for kids, but more time for teachers to plan, because that's a big buzzword in education. They got to plan, they got to collaborate. Well, what they did was they took away a lot of the planning time or professional development time that was built into the day and said, fine, you teachers don't have to be here. You schools are going to be on the line for filling some of it, like getting some college student or parent volunteer or some aide to sit in the lunchroom with the kids. And now the teachers, they just don't have to work as many minutes. But it's not like they don't have to be there quite as long. So it's sort of a weird compromise, and that extra teacher doesn't really have anything to do with anything, because for one thing, it's not necessarily an art teacher or a music teacher, or it can be anybody.
Right. These are just teachers who've been laid off.
Right, and it can just be whatever the principal, if the principal says, I really want an extra reading teacher for the 5th grade because they're really poor readers, he can hire that. So that might help the 5th grade teacher, but it's not going to help the 1st grade teacher or the 2nd grade teacher. So with principals being able to use these any kind of way, it's not really going to matter for the longer school day. It's really that they changed the schedule. Like one of the things they did for the high schools is originally the high schools had 1 day a week where the kids leave 75 minutes early and the teachers would have to stay and do professional development. Now the kids leave 75 minutes early and the teachers leave 75 minutes early. So all that really wipes out is the professional development. It doesn't wipe out it doesn't change anything for kids.
This makes me a little cynical. I just want you to know, I always hate being cynical. It's not my nature. But is it possible then that what we really saw was the teachers getting the thing they wanted, which was not to have to work a longer day, and the schools getting the thing they wanted, which is the teachers not belly aching about the longer day anymore, even though it might not be a quote-unquote better day, it's at least the minutes are there.
Right.
And so everybody just kind of called a truce and said, we can live with this.
I think so. I mean, from day one.
Boy, I wish you hadn't said that. But.
The union went in with this proposal that this would be a way to sort of work it out. And then also these extra teachers. I mean, the union really wants extra music teachers and art teachers and gym teachers. And there's no doubt that the school system needs them. I mean, a lot of kids these days are having, one period of art every 2 weeks, or every week at best. So this is a good thing if those are what is hired.
If that's what's hired.
But
right.
Then you have principals who are under pressure for everything but the art grade, right?
Right. The art grade does not make much difference in the end whether the principal keeps his job, right?
That's right. So whether you're going to get this to be like the test prep person, we don't know. We really don't know. And I think that the union, they decided that they need to show that they are willing to compromise. Chicago Public Schools, after that fact-finding report sort of blew up in their face, decided we need to compromise. They came out with something. But I still think there's a lot of issues that are really on the table, and that the Chicago Public Schools are going to have to compromise if they're going to prevent a strike. The Chicago Public Schools, their PR thing was like, school's going to start on day one. And what they're talking about is double speak, because what they're saying is that on August 13th, which is when Track East school start, year-round school would start. Well, school is going to start on August 13th no matter what,
right.
because they had to have a 30-day cooling off period after the fact-finder report, so the earliest they could strike would be late August anyways.
Yeah.
So
it's not like the teachers could have said, oh no, we're not going in on August 13th.
That's right.
They're contractually obligated to be there anyway.
Right. And it's still September 4th, which is when the other half of Chicago Public Schools starts. It's still up in the air. I mean, my bet is at the moment that they won't strike, but there's no guarantee in this compromise.
So the big question that I really still don't understand, and obviously neither of you have any more sources than I do on this, but what I really can't understand is what is still on the table. What are they, I mean, if this was such a great deal and everybody was so happy with it, why didn't they just all go in the room and sign the documents and it's all done? There are still some really big sticking points, and there's room for both sides to look really bad here, because it might be that the union actually is still at the table because they're not gonna sit for that 2%, even though they don't have to work one more minute a day. They still want more money, and they don't want to say that.
Yeah, and I actually think it's somewhat the 2%, but I also think it's the length of the contract that's a big point, because Emmanuel offered 2% for 1 year and then merit pay. The teachers union is completely against merit pay, a merit pay system. So that's going to be so if they can maybe they would accept 2% for 2-3 years, and then a merit pay system like being piloted in. They might accept something like that. I'm not sure. The other big thing is this whole displaced teachers pool. That it's a big issue, because there's a lot of speculation that a lot of schools will be closed over the next year. Something like next couple of years, maybe 50 to 100 schools. That leaves a lot of displaced teachers. So
that's why it's not only important for them retroactively, but it's important to them because they're looking down the road.
Right. Yeah. So that's my big thing, is that they are going to want to have some. I think the members want some security for those displaced teachers. They want really preference for those displaced teachers for future jobs, and I know that Chicago Public Schools are against that. So I think that's a big battle, because a lot of the displaced teachers are going to have more seniority. They're going to be more expensive than maybe a newer teacher. So it's it's a financial.
So that's
thing.
part of what's keeping CPS at the table. Then is that they want to kill that, or at least
they want to lessen
reduce
that.
it as
Just
much
keep
as
it
they
as
can.
the system that they have now, which is that you go into a pool for a year, and 60% supposedly get hired from that pool, but still, what's happening to the other 40%? CTU has to protect its members to say, like, okay, you get some preference.
So Charlie, looking at the bigger political picture on this, it's fascinating to me to watch Rahm Emanuel, and also that guy. It's hard to remember his name. JC somebody who's he was real big around here for a while, and now
he's
all
a big
of a sudden
guy.
you just don't see him anymore. I don't know what the deal is with that, but has Rahm Emanuel, Mr. Politics, has he actually sort of run up against something here that's a little bigger than he thought?
I think he's run up against a number of things that are a little bigger than he thought, including the schools issue, including the crime issue. I think after a first year in which it was victory after victory, some cracks may be overstating it, but some areas of concern may be emerging, areas in which, he may not be able to deliver quick fixes.
Yeah, and it's classic American politics in a 4-year term that your second year is hard and your third year is really hard and your fourth year you just give up.
Right.
So,
Well, I don't expect that from Rahm Emanuel.
Yeah.
He is, I think deservedly, by reputation, a hard-charging guy.
He certainly is.
I don't expect to see him
not
let up.
not a guy who's going to let up the pressure. That's for sure.
I do think that, well, let me say, as just an observer of the entire civic scene, I hope that he's begun to see in his first year that a little honey in the mix can be effective. He's a confrontational guy. That's kind of the way he works. But I think he may have seen, or we may have seen, that there are limits to that approach and its effectiveness.
It's interesting because it's hard to find somebody who's more of a my way or the highway kind of guy than Richard M. Daley, and Richard M. Daley was able to pull that off for about 20 years, but only because he also had the softer side, right? There were all the other issues that he could throw out there that would soften that hardness. But Rahm hasn't figured that part out yet.
In a legislative sense, I think he has. I think he's, and I covered Emanuel far more closely than I covered Daley. But I think when he's come forth with his legislative packages, he has conceded. I think he seems like the sort of guy who comes in with an idea that we can compromise on this, and this if we need to. I don't get a sense that Daley did. Daley pushed his packages through.
Right.
He may have seemed nicer, but Emanuel, I think, has managed in a legislative sense to compromise, and then make it look after the fact like
we came up with this together, folks. That's right. Yeah. Well, and also, I just can't help but observe that there are stories today in the papers about our police chief observing that July was a calmer month than had been before because we had fewer shootings than last year in July.
It's a good city slogan, isn't it?
Right.
Chicago, we're a little calmer now than we were last month. Come visit.
Right.
And I guess I got to really stop just hammering our police superintendent for this, but I do not understand the strategy of every time the numbers dip by 1 or 2, having a press conference or making statements about, you see, our policies are working. Maybe their policies are working, and I'm more than willing to give them a shot that they are trying a lot of new things, and some of them look very promising, but it's going to be a long haul to get these numbers down, and you can't. Anyway, I've said it all
You're
before.
right, and it's a larger social and socioeconomic problem that is not going to be solved month to month. You can contain it, but it really is a larger social issue. Questions of poverty, questions of education, questions of morality. That there's an entire generation, more than one generation, of Chicagoans who have grown up without any of this. And Mayor Emanuel on occasion has gone big and said, "This is about parenting. We're too late for parenting for the people responsible for today's crimes. You got to work on the next generation."
It's so interesting how the sort of the crime piece, the housing piece, the education piece, they are all so completely and totally inextricably linked that you can have the exact parallel conversation and talk about the same issues and even some of the same players, but you're talking about a different topic, and that's been one of the, I don't know. All right, Charlie, we invited you here to tell us what you think is important going on right now. Go ahead.
I think the state unemployment system needs some improvement.
We've got to make sure that
Right.
unemployment benefits.
This has been. Look, I've been going through this. I've been living through this, and there are a lot of people in this state who are unemployed and who need help.
Yeah.
And anecdotally, and by experience years ago, I can say the people in the unemployment system very responsive. And I've written to some people that I know in state government to offer my help. The website where one goes to apply for unemployment, very difficult to navigate. I spent an hour entering data, and then with one inadvertent click of a button, lost an hour's worth of work all at once. This is really poor web interface design.
And you know something about
I
computers
do.
and web.
I offered to help. I said, I'm available. I have some free time. You need me to volunteer. I can come in and help you rework this website.
Yeah.
But and then at the same time, the unemployment offices are clearly overburdened. I got a letter, an actual letter, saying, please call us, or no, we need to call you at a certain time. Please call us to confirm that you're available at this time. So I call, and I wait 2 minutes through a recorded message telling me all the options that I don't need. And then I finally get a chance to press 1 and get transferred. And I get transferred to a number that rings for like 2 minutes. And then I get a message saying, all operators are busy. Please call again later. No voicemail message, no please
And this is
email
just to
us.
set up a time when you can
That's
talk
right,
to
to
someone.
talk to them about other meetings. So they're clearly overburdened. You'd think you'd want more people to go to the website so that a lot of these transactions can happen, and yet the website is a mess. And I know they're hardworking public officials, but I think it's an issue that is important to many of us unemployed.
To the unemployed community, right, which you're covering.
That's right.
Sarah, I can't let you guys go without bringing up this what seems to be a sort of a little gauntlet right now for elected school board in Chicago. There's a bit of a movement saying that if we had an elected school board, we would be better off. I'm just absolutely not convinced that that's true, but there you are. And also, there's also this sense that Rahm Emanuel himself de-elected the school board, and that we always had this democracy beforehand. Of course, as your newspapers pointed out, that's not true. It hasn't been true for as long as anybody's been alive in Chicago. It's always been appointed by the mayor.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess my personal perspective is, good Lord, we need more politics in Chicago, in the schools. I mean, I can see a big mess there. But
the CTU slate versus the Stanford
Lord.
Children's slate.
I mean, it would just be, it would be entertaining for me, but I don't know if it would be better for the school system. The thing that I think this speaks to is there's a real groundswelling of community organizations out there, community groups that are very upset. I mean, the school closings, the influx of charter schools that are, depleting enrollment in neighborhood schools, just feeling like their voice is not heard. I mean, this last year, they announced what schools were going to close and be turned around, and then they had community hearings, and they didn't change at all. That's where Mayor Rahm Emanuel might think about how. I mean, in the past, I believe that they put out a long list, and they knew which ones they were going to take off the list, but at least it made it seem like they actually listened to some people out there. And then the people that he has on the board, I mean, Jesse Ruiz, it's almost comical how many times he has to abstain from voting because he has so many ties to this, to all these little businesses that are working with CPS. Penny Pritzker, David, they're just all so tied.
It's all tied in.
Yeah.
I'm sorry we're kind of crashing up against the end of the show here, but this is something we have to talk about some more. It just seems like the idea of electing it, though, doesn't necessarily, it just creates an entirely different set of problems so maybe there's a hybrid. That's something they're talking about doing. Anyway, we got to run. I really want to thank you, Sarah, for being on the show today, and Charlie, too. Good luck to you. You've been watching Chicago Newsroom. It's a community service of CAN TV. You can see us right here on cable, and you can also watch us online at this address right here. I'm Ken Davis saying thanks very much, and we will see you again next week on Chicago Newsroom. Bye.